I was pouring the last of my coffee when I heard the diesel engine idling too loud for 6 in the morning, too deliberate. Through the kitchen curtain I saw a county tow truck, and behind it a black SUV with a man in a windbreaker stepping out, clipboard in hand. My son-in-law was parked across the street in a rented Range Rover, window down, filming on his phone. "Rise and shine, old-timer," he shouted loud enough for the whole cul-de-sac. "Repo's here for the boat, the truck, and I hear the bank's coming for the house next." Should have stayed retired in Florida with the rest of the fossils. I set my mug on the porch rail. I didn't raise my voice. I walked out in my robe, looked the repo agent dead in the eye, and asked him one simple question about who had actually authorized this. His clipboard hand started to shake before I even finished the sentence. If you've ever had a son or daughter's spouse treat your kindness like it was theirs to spend, you already know exactly how this morning felt. My name is Walter Briggs. I'm 66, a retired Marine engineer out of Corpus Christi, Texas, and a widower going on 4 years now. My wife Dolores passed from a stroke on a Sunday afternoon while she was watering her tomato plants, and I still haven't found it in me to pull them up, even though they went to seed 2 summers back. I live alone on 5 acres just outside town, the same property where I raised my daughter Carrie, taught her to fish off the dock, walked her down the aisle under a string of lights. I built a good life out of hard, dangerous work. 22 years on rigs in the Gulf, coming home smelling like diesel and salt, missing birthdays so Carrie would never know what it felt like to go without. When Dolores got sick the last time, I sold 2 parcels of land just to keep her comfortable. That's just what you do for the people you love. It was a Wednesday. Trash pickup day, out of habit more than memory these days. The house had that particular emptiness, the kind with weight to it. I'd made my coffee dark and strong, no sugar, the way Dolores used to tease me about. For 4 minutes, standing at that counter, I let myself feel something close to peace. Then the diesel engine turned into my driveway. I need to back up and tell you how I got to that porch, because the truth of it took me almost 2 years to understand, and by the time I did, I'd already signed away more than I ever should have. My daughter married a man named Trevor Voss 3 years ago. He came into our lives with a lot of noise, new truck, tailored shirts, a business card that said consulting, without ever explaining what that meant. I didn't like him from the start. But Carrie was happy, or said she was, and a father's opinion on his daughter's husband is worth exactly what she decides it's worth. The trouble started small, the way it always does. Trevor's firm needed a bridge loan, 60 days, he swore, to cover payroll. I wired him $18,000 because Carrie called me crying that they'd lose their house. 60 days came and went, then 90. Then Trevor stopped mentioning it entirely, like the debt had evaporated from his memory. Anytime I brought it up, Carrie got that tight, wounded look, like I was the unreasonable one for remembering a number. Then came the boat. Nothing fancy, something to take out on the bay on Saturday mornings the way my own father once took me. Trevor asked to borrow it to impress a client. He kept it 6 weeks. It came back with a long gouge down the port side and a fried electronics panel. "Relax, old man," he laughed. "It's just a boat." The exact tone you'd use on a child throwing a tantrum over a toy. "I want you to understand something about me, because it matters for what comes later. I am not a man who forgets things. 22 years on a rig teaches you that details are the difference between coming home and not coming home. I've always written things down. Every wire transfer, every date, every dinner table promise, in a small green ledger in my nightstand drawer. Not out of suspicion. Out of habit. You never know which small thing turns into the thing that sinks you. About 14 months before that Wednesday, Trevor came to me with the opportunity of a lifetime. Undervalued commercial real estate near the new interstate. Ready to triple in a year. He didn't ask for cash this time. He asked me to co-sign a loan using my house and land as collateral. Just a formality, he said, since the bank wanted to see family skin in the game. Carrie sat beside him, holding my hand, telling me this was the thing that would finally set them up for life. I wanted, more than anything, for my daughter's husband to become a man I could respect. That wanting blinded me. I read most of the documents Trevor slid across the table. Most, not all. Buried on page 11, in the small type lawyers use when they don't want you reading it, was a clause granting Sutton Voss Holdings, Trevor's company, a subordinate lien position that activated automatically if I missed a single payment by more than 15 days, transferring control of my collateral, my house, into a holding entity Trevor controlled. I signed where the yellow tab told me to. I trusted my daughter's husband more than my own careful nature, and that is a mistake I will carry the rest of my life. What I didn't know then, what took nearly a year to piece together, was that Trevor never intended to service that loan properly. He made the first 2 payments from an account funded by another loan, this one taken against Carrie's own retirement account, without her full understanding. He let the 3rd payment lapse by exactly 16 days. Not 30, not 90, 16, just enough to trip a clause drafted specifically to be tripped. Just enough to hand my 5 acres to his holding company, while the debt remained entirely mine. Around the same time I learned the truth about the boat. Trevor hadn't borrowed it for any client meeting. He'd used it as collateral for a private loan, lost a margin call, and it had been quietly repossessed and sold 2 states away without a word to me. The truck he'd test-driven for a week had been shopped to 3 dealerships and used as a down payment on the very Range Rover he was now filming me from. I didn't confront him right away. 22 years on a rig teaches you that panic gets men killed. You gather every fact, you understand the full shape of the danger, and only then do you act, because a man who moves too early tips his hand. So I went quiet. I let Trevor believe I was exactly what he'd always assumed, a tired old widower, grateful for scraps of attention, too soft and lonely to fight back. I opened an account at a bank 2 towns over, one he didn't know existed. I hired an attorney, Patricia Alvarez, sharp and no-nonsense, who'd handled maritime contract disputes for the same shipping company I'd once worked for, and I gave her everything from that green ledger. She confirmed what I suspected, under Texas law, that subordinate lien clause was potentially voidable, given how it had been structured and disclosed. But voiding it would take time, evidence, and, most importantly, Trevor's own actions on record, proving intent rather than bad luck. Her advice was simple: let him keep moving. Let him keep believing no one was watching. Every step he took trying to seize my property before the lien was challenged would be one more piece of evidence that this had never been a legitimate business deal. For 11 months I played the part. I nodded along at his portfolio talk. I let Carrie believe I'd forgiven the boat, the truck, all of it. I smiled at Thanksgiving while Trevor bragged about his coming windfall from a property deal with my father-in-law. The whole time, Patricia quietly built the file. Bank records, texts where Trevor bragged to Carrie about getting the old man's land free and clear. Even a voicemail he'd left me by mistake, meant for someone else, laughing about how old men never read the fine print because they just trust family. Which brings us back to that Wednesday. To the diesel engine, the repo agent with the clipboard, and Trevor across the street with his phone raised, narrating my humiliation. I looked at the agent, a heavy-set man named Douglas, who wouldn't quite meet my eyes, and asked, calm and clear, "Who authorized this repossession? And did they show you proof the underlying loan is currently in valid, undisputed default?" Douglas's hand shook harder. He stammered that the paperwork came through Sutton Voss Holdings, that he'd been told the loan was in clear default. "Douglas," I said, "look carefully at the date on that lien transfer. Then call your dispatcher and tell them you're standing in the middle of an active federal fraud investigation. If you tow one item off this property in the next 5 minutes, your company gets named in it." Across the street, Trevor's phone lowered half an inch. I saw it, the first crack. "Are you telling me this filing isn't legitimate?" Douglas asked. "I'm telling you the loan behind this lien was funded through a diverted retirement account, defaulted on purpose, 16 days into a 15-day grace clause, drafted specifically to be triggered, and every piece of that timeline is already with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit in San Antonio. You're not repossessing a boat and a truck this morning, son. You're standing in a crime scene." Douglas didn't argue. He got on his radio. Trevor started walking over, phone still up, still performing. "Don't listen to him. He's just an old man trying to confuse you. The paperwork's filed. It's legal. We own that land now." I turned to face him for the first time that morning. 22 years on a rig teaches you the loudest man in the room is rarely the most dangerous one. "Trevor," I said, "you have 30 seconds to turn that phone off and get off my property before Deputy Ruiz gets here." I called him before you even got out of your car, and unlike Douglas, Ruiz has already seen Patricia's file. Something in his face changed. "You don't have anything," he said, but the edge was gone. "You're bluffing. You're a broke old man about to lose his house." "Am I?" Then explain to Douglas why Sutton Voss Holdings shows 6 figures in undisclosed liabilities to 3 private lenders, one of whom would very much like to know where the boat he financed ended up. Explain why Carrie's retirement account is missing $41,000 she never authorized withdrawing. Explain the voicemail you left me by accident in March, laughing about old men never reading fine print. I watched the blood drain from his face, worse than Douglas's, because Trevor understood all at once that this had never been spontaneous. This had been a trap closing around him for 11 patient months, and he'd walked directly into the center of it, filming his own downfall. Deputy Ruiz's cruiser turned onto the street 90 seconds later. I'd known him since he was a boy, delivering papers on this road, and Patricia had looped him in the day before. He didn't arrest Trevor on the spot. Real life doesn't move like television, but he told Douglas, in front of Trevor, that the tow company needed to stand down pending review, took a statement, and confirmed the federal referral was already active. Trevor's diverted loan paperwork already sat in an FBI file with his name at the top. Carrie arrived 20 minutes later, in tears, not for me, but because Trevor had called her screaming that I was trying to destroy them. She stood in my driveway, the little girl I used to carry down to the dock every summer morning, and looked at me like I was the villain. "How could you do this to him? He's your family." I let that sit a moment before I answered, because I needed her to actually hear it. "Carrie, he emptied your retirement account without telling you. He defaulted a loan on purpose so he could take the house I raised you in. He filmed a repo truck coming for your father's boat and laughed while he did it. I am not the one who did this to your family. I'm the one who spent 11 months trying to stop what he already did to it." She didn't believe me that morning. Grief and love don't listen to evidence on the first telling. I gave her Patricia's number and told her whatever she decided about her marriage was hers alone to decide. That I'd love her the same whether she stayed or left, but I wouldn't sign another document, wire another dollar, or lend another thing to a man who'd already shown her, in black and white, exactly who he was. It took her 6 weeks to leave him, not because of anything I said that morning, but because Patricia's investigator turned up an older loan fraud Trevor had run on his own parents years before Carrie ever met him. She finally understood she'd never been an exception to the pattern. She'd just been its newest chapter. The federal case took most of a year. Trevor pled to 2 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of financial exploitation, that last charge specifically because of what he'd done to my retirement-age collateral. A charge that exists precisely for situations like mine, where family relationships become the soft entry point for crimes that would be far harder to pull off against a stranger. He's serving 4 years at a federal facility outside Beaumont. The Range Rover was seized as an asset of fraud. The boat was never recovered, and I've made my peace with that. Some things you let go of, not because you've forgiven them, but because carrying them any further just gives them more of your life than they've already taken. Carrie lives with me now, in the house Trevor tried to take from her before she even understood it was hers to lose. We don't talk about that morning much. Some Wednesdays, when the trash cans go out the night before and the coffee's dark and strong the way Dolores used to tease me about, I catch Carrie at the same kitchen window I was standing at that day, watching the driveway. And I know she's still working through what it means that the man she loved most, after her mother died, turned out to be the danger she needed protecting from. I think about that green ledger sometimes. Every date, every dollar, written down not because I was looking for a fight, but because 22 years on a rig taught me that the men who survive are the ones who pay attention to the small details nobody else bothers to write down. I think about Douglas's shaking hand on that clipboard, Trevor's phone lowering half an inch, the exact moment his whole performance collapsed in front of the daughter he thought he'd already won. Here's what I want you to take from this. Loving your family does not mean handing them the keys to your survival. Forgiveness is real, and it matters. I've forgiven my daughter for the years she couldn't see what was standing right in front of her. But forgiveness and blind trust are not the same thing. A man can love the people who hurt him, while still refusing to let them do it twice. Some of the most dangerous people in your life will never break a window or pick a lock. They'll simply be handed a key, because you loved them enough to give them one. And it will be up to you, and only you, to decide when loving them stops meaning you have to let them destroy you.